Hi, it's Matthew from Excel Grandmaster. Welcome to our third tutorial in this series. If you're enjoying the videos, please hit subscribe and don't forget to ring the bell to get notifications when new videos come out. In this video, I want to introduce several more functions. We will then show how to combine them to create a more complex outcome. The functions I am going to introduce are COUNTIF. This function will count the number of items that pass a certain criteria, and this function is true when all the criteria are also true, and if. This statement allows us to produce a different result when the criteria used is true or false. The if function allows us to make decisions based on the value of other cells. For example, we could show passed or failed depending on the value of an exam results cell. We could even use a third cell to set the threshold for this. Finally, I want to introduce you to the idea of relative naming. Previously, we have seen how convenient it can be to name a cell or range. With relative naming, we can use the same technique to refer to a different set of cells depending on where we are referencing them from. It sounds complicated, but it's really very simple. I have started up a spreadsheet for the exam results scenario, and we will take the build through to the conclusion. You can see at the top of the sheet that we have rules for reaching a pass grade on this test. Below that, there is the section threshold and an overall threshold. Finally, below that, we have a list of students and the marks they got in each section for the exam. As you can see, the rules we need to use to pass this exam require you to have at least 2 sections at or above the section threshold, and for the total mark to be or to exceed the overall threshold. The total mark is just the sum of the marks from the 3 sections. Now, when I'm faced with problems like this, that can result in some fairly complex looking formulae, I always like to build the constituent parts of the formula in separate cells. That way I can be assured that everything is working before I put it together. This breaking down of problems into their constituent parts is about more than just checking everything is working. It's a key skill to really being able to unlock the power of Excel. Before we go any further though, I want to introduce you to the Name Manager. The Name Manager can be found under Formulas on the ribbon at the top of the Excel window. Inside the Name Manager, we can edit the names that we have created, add new ones, and delete names we no longer need. This can be useful if you've misnamed something or named the wrong cell, but it also enables us to do some much more powerful things. You can see here that I've already created a name for the section threshold and overall threshold, but I've mistyped the name for the overall threshold, so let's correct that now. I select the overall threshold, click Edit, update the name, click OK, and then close. Now, that's corrected. Let's get back to the problem in hand. First off, let's break down what we need to do. We need to check whether each section has reached the pass threshold. We need to check that the overall mark passes the overall threshold. And we need to combine that so we can check that we have reached the criteria for an exam pass. Let's start by naming some of the cells and ranges. That will make it clearer for us when we come to write the formula. I'm going to select cells B8 to D8. Go to the name box and call that Scores. Then I will select B8 on its own and call that section underscore 1. Note there is no space there. You're not allowed to use spaces when naming cells or ranges, so I've used the underscore. Then I will name C8 section underscore 2 and finally D8 section underscore 3. Okay, so now let's write some formula to check whether the student has passed this exam. First, we need to check each section mark. In cell H8, I'm going to check if section 1 has been passed. To do this, I will compare the value in section 1 with the section threshold. I will use equals section underscore 1 is greater than or equal to section underscore threshold. This will return true if the section 1 mark is greater than or equal to the section threshold. Otherwise, it will return false. In cell IA, I'm going to make the same comparison against section 2. Equals section underscore 2 greater than or equal to section underscore threshold. And in J8, the same for section 3. Equals section underscore 3 is greater than or equal to section underscore threshold. We now have 3 cells containing either true or false. And we can see that the student reached the threshold for sections 1 and 2 of the exam, and not section 3. His marks were 25, 27 and 19, so that's right. Okay, so now let's check that the student's overall mark reached the overall threshold. You'll remember we set up the named range, scores, and we're going to use that now with the sum function to check that. And actually, we have a column where we can record the total marks, column E. So in cell E8, I'm going to type equals sum, open brackets, scores, close brackets, press enter. And you can see the student scored 71 overall. In cell K8, I will check that against the overall threshold. I will type equals E8 is greater than or equal to overall underscore threshold. And you can see that has returned true, as the student's total marks exceeded the 60 that I had set for the overall threshold. Right, so we've checked each section. It's time to count the number of sections that exceed the threshold. Remember, we needed 2 sections to achieve pass mark. We're going to do that using the COUNTIF function. In cell L8, I will type equals COUNTIF, open brackets. And you can see from the tooltip that the first thing this function needs is a range in which to operate. We can use our named range, scores, for this, and then type comma. The criteria is the next requirement. Well, our criteria is that the mark be greater than or equal to the section threshold. The criteria needs to be in the form of a string, so we need to put it in quotes. I will type quotes, greater than or equal to, quotes, ampersand, section underscore threshold. We have used the ampersand outside of the quotes as we don't want to set the word section underscore threshold to be the criteria, but the value that it returns, in this case 20. I will close the bracket and press enter. Now you can see the number of passed sections is 2, which when we check against our earlier columns is right. You can see we have 2 trues and 1 false. Now let's combine all that together to get a true or false if the student has passed or failed. To do that, we're going to use the AND function. This checks that a number of logical tests are true, and if they are, it will return true. Otherwise, it will return false. So in cell M8, I will type equals AND, open brackets, K8, comma, L8 is greater than or equal to 2, close brackets. K8 contains true or false depending on the student's overall mark, and L8 is greater than or equal to 2 will be true if the COUNTIF function returns a number greater than or equal to 2, showing the student reached the required section threshold in at least 2 sections of the exam. In this case, we get true. The student has passed. We still need to tidy up, however, as all we want to see is either pass or fail in the pass-fail column, and not any of this working out. I'm going to use the if function to determine whether I show pass or fail in column F. So in cell F8, I will enter equals if, open bracket. And you can see we now need to enter a logical test. In this case, we can enter M8, as this is already true or false, depending on whether the student has passed. Then comma, and now we need to let the function know what we want to happen if the logical test was true. Well, we want it to print the word pass in the cell, so quotes, pass, quotes. And then a second comma, and we need to type quotes, fail, quotes, as this is what we want to show if the logical test was false. Close the bracket and press enter. Now you can see we have the word pass in the cell. That's great. That's just what we wanted. But we only have the result for one student. To extend that to the other students, I will select cells E8 to M8 and click in this small square here at the bottom right of the selection. Holding my mouse button down, I will drag down to the other rows that I need to fill and release the button. This has copied the formula down that I needed. But hang on, the name cells and ranges refer to row 8, so all my answers just refer to that one student. You can see they don't match for the other 3 students. Now we can fix this by changing some of our named cells from absolute to relative references. So instead of referring specifically to cell B8, we can make section underscore 1 refer to column B, but also refer to whichever row we happen to be working in. First, let's select cell F8. It's important we select a specific row as our starting point when we do this. Then we will go to the Name Manager, under Formulas in the ribbon, and we're going to edit section underscore 1. In the refers box here, we're going to remove the second of the 2 dollar symbols. The dollar symbol is what fixes the position of the reference, so by leaving the first one, I'm still fixing the column, in this case column B, but I'm allowing the row to change. And I'll click OK. Now I will do the same for section underscore 2, keeping the column fixed, column C, but removing the dollar symbol that fixed the row and allowing it to change, and click OK. And for section underscore 3, removing the second dollar symbol and clicking OK. Now we need to use the same technique with the range that we named scores. We have 2 dollar symbols to remove this time, the second symbol in the starting cell and the second symbol in the end cell. This will fix the columns of these cells to B and D, but allow the rows to change. And then I'll click OK. While we're here, let's create a new name that will help us refer to the total mark that the student achieved. I will click New, and in the name box here, I will type total underscore mark. Let's leave the scope for another time and come down to the refers to box. Here, I will enter equals sheet 1 exclamation mark to let Excel know we're referring to the worksheet called sheet 1, and then $E8, fixing the column we're referring to as column E and allowing the row to move. And now I will close the Name Manager, and you can see the cells have all updated to match the data for each student. Let's also introduce our new name cell into the formula in cell K8. So I can replace E8 in the formula with total underscore mark and press enter. And you can see it still works fine. Let's go back to that cell and drag from the box on the bottom right of that cell down over the other cells in the column to update the formulas in those cells too. Finally, let's clean all this up. We can put all of this into one formula and remove the workings. To do that, I'm going to replace our cell references with the functions that are in those cells. For example, in cell M8, the formula reads equals and, open brackets, K8, comma, L8 is greater than or equal to 2. I will replace K8 and L8 with the formulas that we wrote in those cells. Selecting K8, I will then select everything in the formula bar except the equals. We don't need that. Right click, copy, and press escape. I will then return to M8 and select the text K8 in the formula bar. Right click and paste, and then press enter. Going back to that cell, you can see it successfully entered that in our formula. Let's do the same with the formula in L8. Copy everything except the equals, right click, copy, and then escape. You could also use the Control-C keyboard shortcut to copy the formula. Back to M8 and select L8 in the formula. Right click and paste in the formula from cell L8 and press enter. Again, we could have used the keyboard shortcut Control-V to paste it. Finally, let's take all of that and paste it into our if function. So I'll select everything in M8 except the equals, right click and copy and press escape. If we don't press escape here, we'll edit this formula by mistake. Then we'll go to cell F8. Select the M8 in the formula bar, right click and paste in the formula and press enter. You can see everything is still working. So let's go back to cell F8 and drag that little box in the bottom right down to replace the other formulas in column F. And that's great. We have pass or fail for each student. We can now remove the workings. So selecting cells H8 to M11 and pressing delete, you can see the workings have cleared and the pass-fail column is still working well. And we are done. Now that was a lot more to take in than we had in the previous tutorials, but it was all built on what you already learned. Take some time to re-watch this video and then try some of the things we've covered here for yourself. Thanks for watching. See you next time.